Rising Storm 2 Vietnam, made by Tripwire Interactive and Antimatter Games, a follow-up game to Red Orchestra 2 Heroes of Stalingrad and Rising Storm. Initially released on May 30th, 2017, to an extremely positive reception from gamers and from fans of Tripwire's previous works. It continued to satisfy fans of the game with free content updates, adding much to the game including new factions and weapons, exploring a lot more of the Vietnam War than had been seen in a video game to date. Until we saw the infamous Epic Game Store update, which saw the game's legacy thrown in the gutter as development on the game stopped. I'll be exploring and piecing together the rise and fall of Rising Storm 2 in this video, hopefully giving some form of an explanation to the current state of the game. Rising Storm 2 Vietnam was first revealed at E3 2015. It is a direct sequel to Tripwire Interactive's 2013 title Rising Storm. The original Rising Storm, famous for its asymmetric warfare to keep historical accuracy, Rising Storm 2 followed suit, with the South and North forces having different abilities to balance each other out. As Rising Storm 2 was developed over the course of 2 years, it went through multiple stages of closed betas, commencing in 2016 and going through 7 waves and 1 open beta before release on the 30th of May 2017. During these betas, Tripwire and Antimatter really listened to their fanbase in order to create Rising Storm 2 and took on a lot of feedback to help with the quality of the game. May 30th, 2017, Rising Storm 2 Vietnam releases. It is received well by gamers. The game depicts the Vietnam War in a fun and interesting way, showing off asymmetrical gameplay, emulating what guerrilla warfare is like in a 64-player experience. Tripwire and Antimatter continue to add content to the game for free, with the release of the Bushranger update in November 2017. This added the Australian forces, the Bushranger Huey, new weapons and new maps. They followed this up in May 2018 with the ARVN update. They added more maps, weapons and the ARVN faction. Once again, this content was added for free and kept players' sentiments towards Tripwire positive. The game did have monetization in the form of cosmetic packs for your soldier, however a large portion of these were unlockable by ranking up. After this update in September 2018, the multiplayer campaign mode was added, a legacy game mode where multiplayer matches are linked together in an overall military campaign of Vietnam. This was popular with players from Rising Storm and Red Orchestra 2. The game also saw popularity from content creators as well, most notably from these videos.
Go, Digi, go!
Clearing.
Ow!
Go, push.
Have you tried shooting him?
Got him.
I got the fucking head weapon! Fuck yeah! Everyone hang on!
This all contributed to the status the game had climbed to. The Green Army Men mod was a competition winner from a Tripwire modding competition. It was built off of Rising Storm 2. They originally paired with Tripwire as a seasonal event, but later it was fully incorporated into the game as a paid-for DLC in July 2019, where the profits were shared with the modding team and Tripwire and Antimatter. This DLC received mixed reviews, with some players praising it and others finding it utterly pointless, as it did nothing to add to the base game of Rising Storm 2. To this day, a lot of the core player base find the Green Army Men DLC pointless and a waste of Tripwire's development time, most people thinking that they could have spent the time working on the base game. Following on from this, in April 2020, the Talisvota Winter War mod was released. This mod was received well by players as it pleased a portion of the fanbase that had come from Red Orchestra 2. It added new weapons, voice acting and historically accurate character customization. Unfortunately, the mod did not sustain an active player base and died out quite quickly after a month, as it didn't receive a lot of the love from the community in the long term, as it didn't retain players' interests. As of September 2019, Tripwire announced that Antimatter Games had been acquired by Toadman Interactive. This had been announced the month prior, but it meant a serious turning point for the state of Rising Storm 2. In an announcement updating players on the state of the game, Tripwire stated Antimatter Games, who did the majority of development on Rising Storm 2 Vietnam. This is important to note, as it gives explanation for a lot of the major downfalls of later updates to Rising Storm 2. But from this quote we can draw a conclusion that Antimatter Games were the studio most familiar with the game's source code, and they would no longer be actively developing the game. Antimatter would go on to work on their own project later announced as 83. A year later, in October 2020, we saw what was meant to be the final quality of life update for Rising Storm 2 Vietnam. After rumours throughout the community after Killing Floor 2 was released on the Epic Games Store, it would be announced that the game would be added to Epic Games Store as a free game for a week and then to its normal pricing. The final update was supposed to leave the game in a finished state so it would become a legacy game like Rising Storm and Red Orchestra 2. When the update initially dropped, it was supposed to add Epic Games Store integration to the multiplayer, migrate VoIP to Vivox from D3D Proxy, and a general load of other smaller bug fixes. However, this was all overshadowed by one major issue. Instead of releasing the shipping build of the game, they instead released the debug version of the game that allowed players to unleash hell. The second major issue that came with the 1.5 update was that there were too many players for the amount of servers. These new players looking to join a match would hit the Find Game button and cause havoc for everyone playing in these matches. The game client would look to join a server, and when it couldn't join one, would attempt to join another server. However, Tripwire did not anticipate the amount of people who would download the game for free. This influx of players constantly trying to join servers caused most active servers to experience DDoS issues, and thus the experience of matches became unplayable. Throughout October 2020, Tripwire worked on hotfixes to correct the most pressing issues. However, one thing that changed the state of the game dramatically and hasn't been fixed to this day is the VoIP. When the game originally launched, it used a VoIP software called D3D Proxy, which is built by DirectX. This worked on the whole pretty well in Rising Storm 2 and gave local VoIP chat a real immersive feeling. However, when the time came to migrate the game for Epic Games Store's integration, they migrated the VoIP to Vivox. Vivox is a VoIP software also used across multiple titles and supports cross-platform play. Currently it is owned by Unity, and this is used in games like Rainbow Six Siege and PUBG. While Vivox can be implemented well into games, the use of it in Rising Storm 2 is poor, and this has hurt a decent portion of the community as Rising Storm 2 relies on communication, and now this element has been reduced in the game, as it is extremely buggy and unpredictable, which is a shame. Another example of a game that struggles to implement Vivox is Hell Let Loose, where once again Vivox isn't implemented well. While this is only speculation, looking at the withdrawal of Antimatter Games, who are the main studio that worked on the code of the game, I would assume the team left to support Rising Storm 2 weren't the most familiar with the game's code, so I feel like this would explain why the Epic Games Store update wasn't implemented very well. Tripwire decided to do one more update for Rising Storm 2 that was released in April 2021, which added a community map into the official roster, map fixes and VoIP fixes. The VoIP fixes seemed to be ineffective on the whole, and the map fixes were done to the core maps developed by Tripwire and Antimatter. It is understandable why Tripwire no longer wishes to support the game, as they are a smaller company and Rising Storm 2 is no longer profitable for them. They were able to supplement further development with the cosmetic DLCs, but this is no longer enough money for them to cover the wages of developers working on the game. To conclude, Rising Storm 2 has had a rough ride from its launch, with Tripwire being unable to support it towards the end due to the game no longer being profitable and the loss of Antimatter Games. Rising Storm 2 will no longer have the legacy that Red Orchestra 2 and Rising Storm have. While all these games have bugs, Rising Storm 2 is likely to be left in a state that the community is unhappy with, and leaves a bad taste in the mouth of fans. There are rumours of a patch to help fix VoIP after 1.6, but most people are not holding out for this. It is a shame for the Rising Storm 2 Vietnam player base, as it's shrinking due to Epic Games Store players having a bad experience and most dedicated players turning away to find better experiences in other games. Most people's hope is now in Antimatter Games 83. Thank you for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed. It's something different to what the usual is. But anyway, Some of the statements in this video are pure speculation from the research I've done, but we'll never be able to confirm unless Tripwire come out with their own statement. But if you're new, please remember to like and subscribe. Please leave comments down below discussing your views on the state of Rising Storm 2.